All right, listener, are you ready to kind of level up your argumentation skills?
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of logical fallacies.
I love it.
You've sent us a whole book on winning arguments,
Yeah.
and let's just say it gets a little sneaky.
Oh, yeah?
We're going to break down the most common and powerful fallacies, how to spot them, and just maybe how to use them strategically.
Oh,
Think of it as a masterclass in the art of persuasion.
very cool.
Mm.
It's really fascinating how this book goes beyond just like the logical structure of arguments,
Right.
and it exposes those kind of psychological tricks and traps that can really get us even when we think we're being totally rational.
Yeah. So let's start with the basics.
Right.
What exactly is a fallacy?
So in the simplest terms, a fallacy is like a flaw in an argument that makes it seem persuasive, even though logically it's not sound at all.
Right.
It's like a trapdoor in a bridge.
Ah.
It might look totally safe, but as soon as you step on it, boom, your whole argument collapses.
Yeah. And the book we're looking at kind of presents this whole collection of these fallacies, right?
Yeah, and it does it in a very practical way, alphabetically.
Okay.
So you can quickly reference them in the heat of debate.
Okay.
And, we're going to go through some of the most interesting ones. But remember, this is just a small sample of a much larger arsenal.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's jump into it. I think we've all probably been on the receiving end of this first one, the good old ad hominem attack.
Ah, yes, the classic. You attack the person, not the argument.
Right.
So it's an attempt to discredit the speaker instead of actually addressing the points they're making.
Yeah.
The book has a really vivid example. Imagine someone dismissing a professor's argument for merging colleges simply because that professor has a past drunk driving conviction.
It's a way of saying, don't listen to this person because they're flawed.
Exactly.
But those flaws have absolutely nothing to do with what they're talking about right now.
Yeah, and it's surprisingly effective
Right.
because it taps into our emotions, our biases.
Yeah.
We tend to be more skeptical of people we don't trust or dislike,
Yeah.
even if their past actions are totally irrelevant to what's being discussed.
You see this all the time.
All the time.
Political debates, online arguments,
Yeah.
even just personal disagreements.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. It's a powerful way to derail a conversation and shift the focus away from the actual issue.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of shifting focus, let's talk about the red herring fallacy.
Oh, yeah.
This one's all about distraction.
Yeah, precisely.
Right.
The red herring is a deliberate attempt to kind of divert attention from the real issue by introducing something totally irrelevant, but often emotionally charged.
Right.
It's like a magician using all those flashy hand movements,
Yeah.
To distract you from what they're actually doing.
Oh.
The book uses a really humorous example. Imagine someone deflecting a question about a stolen necklace
Okay.
by suddenly pointing out someone else's dog breed.
Right.
Completely off topic.
Yeah.
But it creates a distraction.
Right. And then in all the confusion, the original question gets lost.
Exactly.
You see this all the time in media spin political debates.
Oh, yeah.
Even in everyday conversations.
For sure.
When someone just doesn't want to answer the question.
It exploits our limited attention spans and our tendency to get sidetracked.
Yes. Okay, now for a fallacy that I think we've all probably used at some point, even if we weren't aware of it,
Uh-oh.
the straw man fallacy.
The straw man.
Yeah.
So this one involves misrepresenting your opponent's argument to make it easier to attack.
Right.
It's like building a scarecrow and then pretending you've defeated a real opponent.
Right.
The book gives an example of someone refuting modern evolutionary theory by attacking outdated arguments that Darwin made.
Right.
As if science hasn't progressed in the last century.
So instead of engaging with the strongest version of their argument,
Yeah.
you create a weaker, distorted version
Yeah,
and then knock it down.
exactly.
The straw man.
You win the debate by fighting a phantom opponent, not engaging with the real ideas at all.
And it's effective because most people aren't familiar with every single detail of these complex topics.
Right.
So it's easy to get away with.
Yeah, for sure.
This one's particularly common online, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's easy to cherry pick weak points or take statements out of context to build that straw man argument.
Absolutely.
Okay, now let's move on to a fallacy that plays on our desire to fit in. The bandwagon fallacy,
Oh, yeah.
also known as argumentum ad populum.
This one tries to persuade you by claiming that something must be true just because a lot of people believe it.
Right.
It's the everyone else is doing it, so you should too
Yeah.
argument.
The book uses a rather chilling example. Are we to see the streets of this ancient land of ours given over to strange faces?
Right.
It's a way of stirring up fear and prejudice by appealing to a sense of shared identity and tradition.
It preys on that deep-seated need we have for belonging and conformity.
Yeah.
We're social creatures,
Yeah.
and we have a natural tendency to want to align ourselves with the majority.
Right.
And this fallacy really exploits that.
Yeah.
Makes us question our own judgment, even when it conflicts with what everyone else is saying or doing.
It's like peer pressure
Yeah.
on a societal scale, and you see it everywhere.
Oh, it's everywhere.
From marketing campaigns that emphasize popularity
Right.
to, social movements that gain momentum based on, widespread support.
Absolutely.
It's a really powerful way to kind of bypass critical thinking
Yeah.
and appeal to our emotional desire to be part of the group.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that just because something is popular,
Hey.
it doesn't mean it's true or right or ethical.
Exactly. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and tackle a fallacy that often trips people up when it comes to understanding cause and effect.
Okay.
The post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy.
Oh, yeah.
That's a mouthful.
It is.
But basically it means confusing correlation with causation.
Just because B happened after A doesn't mean that A caused B.
Right.
The book is a hilarious example, blaming the rise of illegitimate births on the introduction of canned peas.
Now that sounds absurd.
It does.
But this type of faulty reasoning underpins a lot of superstitious beliefs and unfounded claims.
Absolutely. We're pattern-seeking creatures.
Yeah.
And, we want to find connections even when they don't exist.
We see a correlation and our brains automatically connect them.
Yeah.
Even if it makes no sense.
It makes sense to us.
Right. I was reading an article the other day
Yeah.
about how some people are blaming the increase in allergies on the decline in childhood diseases.
Classic example
Right.
of post hoc ergo propter hoc thinking.
While there might be a correlation,
Yeah.
there could be many other factors at play, like changes in diet, environmental exposures, even genetic predispositions.
Right. It's not a direct line.
Right. It's a reminder that correlation does not equal causation.
Very important.
We need to be careful about jumping to conclusions based solely on the timing of events.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's delve into a fallacy that plays on our sense of fairness and reciprocity.
All right.
The tu quoque fallacy.
Tu quoque literally translates to you too.
Right.
And this fallacy involves deflecting criticism by saying, well, you do it too.
Yeah.
Right.
It's that classic childhood retort, I know you are, but what am I?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The book gives the example of someone deflecting criticism about misleading society by pointing out that the accuser's son-in-law benefited from a previous decision.
So it's a way of shifting the focus away from your own wrongdoing.
Yeah.
And creating a sense of, well, you're a hypocrite, so your argument's invalid.
Exactly.
But of course...
Two wrongs don't make a right.
No, they don't.
Right.
It doesn't actually invalidate the criticism just because the accuser is guilty of similar behavior.
Right.
Each action should be judged on its own merits,
Yeah.
regardless of who is making the accusation. It's a reminder that pointing out hypocrisy doesn't automatically absolve someone of their own responsibility.
Exactly.
It's interesting how all these fallacies that we've discussed so far really tap into these different psychological vulnerabilities.
Oh, sure.
Whether it's our biases or desire to fit in,
Yeah.
or just our tendency to oversimplify these really complex issues.
Absolutely. And that's what makes them so effective.
Right.
They bypass our logical reasoning and they appeal to our emotions, our instincts, our cognitive shortcuts.
Yeah. Are you ready to unpack a few more?
Oh, yeah. Bring them on.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what other logical traps lie ahead.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's delve into some more fascinating fallacies.
Okay.
Have you ever heard someone dismiss an idea simply because of its origin?
Yeah.
That's what we call the genetic fallacy.
So it's like saying we can't possibly consider this idea because it came from them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The genetic fallacy judges an argument based solely on its source rather than its content. The book gives a rather striking example. Don't be obsessed with punctuality. It was Mussolini who wanted the trains to run on time.
So even a dictator can have a good idea.
Precisely.
Well.
We should evaluate ideas based on their merit, not on the character or beliefs of the person who proposed them.
Right.
It's easy to dismiss something out of hand if we dislike the source, but that doesn't mean the idea itself is inherently bad.
It reminds me of those times when someone criticizes a movie just because they don't like the director.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
We need to separate the art from the artist,
Right.
the message from the messenger.
Right.
Otherwise, we risk missing out on valuable insights or solutions.
Okay, this next fallacy, argumentum ad antiquitatem, sounds like something you'd hear in a dusty library.
It's the appeal to tradition. The argument that something must be good or true, simply because it's been done that way for a long time.
Oh.
The book mentions how cigarette brands used to use this fallacy, implying that their long history was a testament to their quality.
As if longevity somehow equals correctness.
Right? Think about outdated medical practices.
Right.
Or societal norms that we've thankfully abandoned.
Yeah.
Just because something's old doesn't make it right. Just like something being new doesn't automatically make it better.
Which brings us to the flip side of that coin. Argumentum ad novitum. The appeal to novelty.
Exactly. This fallacy assumes that something is better simply because it's new.
Right.
Advertisers love to use this one, slapping new and improved on products,
Yeah.
even if the changes are minimal.
It's like that saying, shiny new object syndrome.
Yeah.
We get so caught up in the excitement of the latest thing that we forget to critically evaluate its actual value.
We need to be wary of accepting something just because it's trendy or recently released.
Right.
Genuine innovation does exist, but is not guaranteed by newness alone.
Okay, let's dive into a fallacy that seems to pop up frequently in discussions about personal choices. Argumentum ad hominem circumstantial.
Oh, this one tries to dismiss someone's argument by attacking their circumstances or affiliations,
Okay.
rather than addressing the argument itself.
Yeah, the book gives an example of someone saying, of course he supports higher taxes for the wealthy. He's a socialist.
Right.
As if someone's political affiliation automatically invalidates their argument.
It's a way of saying you only believe that because you belong to that group,
Right.
instead of engaging with the substance of their point.
It's like dismissing someone's opinion on climate change simply because they work for an oil company,
Right.
without actually addressing the evidence they present.
We have to remember that even people with vested interests can make valid points.
Right.
We should judge arguments on their own merit, not on the supposed motives of the speaker.
Okay, now this next fallacy sounds almost mystical. Argumentum ad ignorantium.
Ah, yes,
Yeah.
the appeal to ignorance.
Okay.
This fallacy claims that something must be true because it hasn't been proven false,
Yeah.
or vice versa.
I can see how this one would be tempting, especially when we're dealing with unknowns.
The book uses the example of paranormal phenomena.
Okay.
Just because we can't explain something doesn't automatically mean it's supernatural. Lack of evidence isn't proof of anything.
Yeah.
It simply means we don't yet have a satisfactory explanation.
It's like saying, we haven't found evidence of extraterrestrial life, therefore it doesn't exist.
Right.
Or, conversely, we haven't disproven the existence of Bigfoot, so it must be real.
This fallacy plays on our natural curiosity and desire for certainty.
Right.
It's easier to accept a fantastic explanation than to admit we just don't know something.
This next one, ex post facto statistics, sounds a bit technical. Can you break it down for us?
It involves using statistics in a misleading way,
Okay.
often to create a sense of amazement or improbability where none really exists.
Okay.
The book gives a funny example. I met my aunt in Trafalgar Square on Wednesday. Think of hundreds of thousands going through the square that day, and you'll realize how unlikely it was we should meet there. Maybe we are telepathic.
But really, it's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
You're bound to run into people, if you frequent the same places.
Exactly. This fallacy preys on our tendency to see patterns and meaning in random events.
Right.
We tend to overestimate the significance of unlikely coincidences.
It reminds me of those mind-blowing facts that circulate online, like, you're more likely to be killed by a vending machine than a shark.
Oh, yeah.
Those statistics are often taken out of context or based on flawed data, but they play on our fascination with the improbable.
Right. It's essential to be critical of the statistics we encounter and consider the source, the methodology, and the potential biases involved. Don't let impressive-sounding numbers fool you.
Speaking of being fooled, let's talk about the gambler's fallacy. I have a feeling I know some people who fall prey to this one.
This fallacy assumes that past events can influence the outcome of random events.
Yeah.
Think of someone believing a coin is due to land on heads after a series of tails.
Ah, the classic I'm due for a win mentality.
The problem is each coin flip, each roll of the dice is independent of the previous one.
Right.
Past results have absolutely no bearing on the future outcome.
It's like thinking that lightning can't strike the same place twice.
Right.
It can, and it does.
It can and it does.
Each event is statistically independent.
This fallacy can lead to some bad decisions, especially when gambling.
Yeah.
People might double down on a losing bet, thinking they're bound to win eventually, but they're just digging themselves a deeper hole.
It's a reminder that we need to approach random events with a clear understanding of probability and avoid letting our emotions or past experiences cloud our judgment.
Now, for a fallacy that oversimplifies things to an extreme. Bifurcation, also known as the black and white fallacy.
This one sounds like it could lead to some heated arguments.
It certainly can. Bifurcation presents a situation as having only two options, when in reality there might be many possibilities.
Right.
The book gives the classic example.
Yeah.
If you're not with us, you're against us.
Yeah.
It forces a choice between two extremes, ignoring the possibility of neutrality, nuance, or compromise.
It's like that old saying, you're either part of the solution or part of the problem.
Exactly. It creates a false dichotomy, oversimplifying complex issues and shutting down productive dialogue. You see this tactic used often in politics, where issues are often framed in terms of us versus them.
Right.
It's a way to polarize opinions and rally support, but it rarely reflects the true complexity of the situation.
So how can we avoid falling into the trap of bifurcation?
By remembering that most issues have more than two sides, and that there are often shades of gray between black and white.
Okay.
Be wary of anyone trying to force you into an either-or choice without acknowledging the full spectrum of possibilities.
Okay, let's tackle another fallacy that seems to play on our love of simplicity, composition.
This one assumes that what is true of the parts must also be true of the whole.
So it's like saying every ingredient in this cake is delicious, therefore the cake must be delicious.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
But of course, a cake is more than just the sum of its parts.
Right.
The way the ingredients are combined, the baking process, even the temperature, can all affect the final outcome.
The book provides an economic example. Farmers benefit from price supports on beef shoemakers. Benefit from price supports on shoes. Therefore, the whole economy would benefit if all products were subsidized.
But that logic ignores the complexities of the economic system.
Yeah.
What might be beneficial for individual sectors could have negative consequences for the overall economy, leading to inflation, market distortions, and unintended consequences.
It's a reminder that we need to be careful about generalizing from individual cases to the whole.
And that brings us to a fallacy that's often used to justify questionable choices. Damning the alternatives.
This one sounds like it could get pretty manipulative.
It attempts to support one option simply by attacking all the other options without actually demonstrating the chosen option's merit.
It's like saying this restaurant might not be great, but it's the best of a bad bunch.
Right.
That doesn't actually tell us anything about the quality of the restaurant itself.
Just because the alternatives are flawed doesn't make the chosen option automatically good.
Right.
We need to evaluate each option based on its own merits, not just in comparison to its competitors.
We've covered a lot of ground today, and it's amazing to see how many different ways our thinking can be subtly manipulated.
It's like we've donned a pair of X-ray glasses, allowing us to see through the smoke and mirrors of persuasive tactics.
Yeah.
But there's still a few more fallacies to uncover.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is like having X-ray vision now when looking at all these arguments and debates.
And with this newfound clarity, you'll start noticing these fallacies everywhere you look.
Yo, I'm sure it will.
So let's continue our exploration with one that's often used to intimidate or confuse.
Okay.
It's called blinding with science.
Okay, this one sounds like something a mad scientist would do.
Well, not quite mad, but certainly crafty.
Okay.
It involves using overly technical jargon or complex language
Right.
to make an argument sound more impressive or authoritative than it actually is.
So it's like using big words to hide the fact that you don't really know what you're talking about.
In a way, yes. The book gives an amusing example talking about how transportation flow charts reveal a pattern of decantation of concentrated passenger units.
Which I'm guessing is a fancy way of saying people are coming into town for dinner and a show.
Exactly. It's all dressed up in scientific-sounding language to make it seem more profound or convincing.
Right.
You see this tactic used in advertising pseudoscience, even in some academic fields, where specialized terminology can create a barrier to understanding for those outside the field.
It's like using a smoke machine to make your argument look bigger and more intimidating. But once the smoke clears, the argument itself might be quite flimsy.
Right. Always be wary of arguments that rely heavily on jargon or obscure language.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to ask for clarification or to challenge the substance of the argument beneath the fancy words.
Okay, now this next fallacy, the bogus dilemma, sounds like something I encounter in meetings all the time.
It's the fallacy of presenting a limited set of options when there might be many other possibilities. The book gives the example of a Greek mother telling her son, "Don't go into politics. If you tell the truth, men will hate you. If you tell lies, the gods will hate you. Since you must either tell the truth or tell lies, you must be hated either by men or by the gods."
It's very clever, but it completely ignores the possibility of maybe being truthful without being offensive or finding some kind of compromise.
Exactly. The bogus dilemma forces a false choice,
Yeah.
limiting our options and often leading to poor decisions.
Right. Think about those times when someone says you're either with us or against us.
Exactly.
It creates a false sense of urgency and pressure,
Right.
and it ignores the potential for, neutrality, collaboration, or alternative
It
solutions.
shuts down all those possibilities.
So how can we avoid falling into this trap?
By challenging the premise of the dilemma,
Okay.
are those really the only two options?
Right.
Are there other possibilities that haven't been considered?
Yeah.
By broadening our perspective and thinking outside the box, we can break free from the constraints of the bogus dilemma.
Okay, let's talk about definitional retreat, which sounds like a sneaky tactic to me.
It certainly can be.
Yeah.
It involves changing the definition of a word or phrase to avoid admitting you're wrong.
Oh, okay.
The book gives the example of someone saying they hadn't been drinking when they meant they hadn't had more than they usually consume on a social evening.
So it's a way of twisting the meaning of language to fit your own narrative.
Precisely. It's a form of semantic manipulation,
Okay.
shifting the goalposts to avoid conceding a point.
Right.
Imagine someone saying, I didn't steal your car. I just borrowed it without your permission.
Right.
It's a deceptive way to try to escape responsibility by redefining the terms of the argument.
Yeah, it's a reminder that words matter and that we need to be really attentive to how they're being used, especially in an argument.
Absolutely.
Don't let someone weasel their way out of accountability by playing with definitions.
Now let's look at special pleading, which seems to be all about demanding exceptions to the rules.
I have a feeling I've seen this one in action a few times.
It involves demanding special treatment or exemption from the standards that apply to everyone else.
Right.
The book gives the example of someone saying capitalism is flawed while claiming that socialism has never been properly tried.
Right.
It's a way of shielding one's preferred system from criticism
Yeah.
while holding others to a different standard.
It's like saying everyone should follow the speed limit except me because I'm a very good driver.
Exactly. Special pleading creates a double standard,
Right.
often to protect one's own interests or beliefs.
Right.
It undermines fairness and consistency,
Yeah.
and it prevents us from having honest conversations about the strengths and weaknesses of different ideas or systems.
Well, we've explored quite a menagerie of logical fallacies today.
We have.
It's amazing how many ways our reasoning can be subtly skewed, isn't it?
It really is.
It's a testament to the power of persuasion and how our minds can be influenced by these clever tactics, even when they're not logically valid.
And, the good news is, now that you're aware of these fallacies, you're better equipped to recognize them and to defend yourself against their influence.
Listener, I hope you found this deep dive into logical fallacies as enlightening as I have.
Me too.
It's like we've been given a toolkit for critical thinking,
Yeah.
allowing us to dissect arguments, identify weaknesses, and construct more sound and persuasive arguments ourselves.
Absolutely.
So listener, remember, critical thinking is a skill that can be honed and sharpened with practice.
It's like a muscle.
Yeah.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
So stay curious, question everything, and never stop learning.
The world of argumentation awaits,
It does.
and now you have the knowledge to navigate it with confidence and skill.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the fascinating world of logical fallacies. Until next time, listener, happy arguing.